Hey everybody, welcome inside the sit down here on CBS Local. Ryan Mayer now joined by CBS Sports golf correspondent and reporter Amanda Balionis. Amanda, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you're out in San Francisco, TPC Harding Park, the location for this year's PGA Championship coming up on CBS this weekend. And as you look at this course, it's the first ever major that's going to be held there, not the first ever tournament, obviously, but just what can fans expect from this atmosphere, from this style of golf course out in San Francisco?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of atmosphere, obviously different than any other major in the history of majors. We're not going to have fans out there this year. And I was actually out for Steph Curry's charity event that was held at TPC Harding Park before all of the madness hit. And I remember thinking, this is going to be a wild event with all the spectators because the course itself is already so narrow. There's trees lining the fairways. The PGA of America obviously always does a great job of narrowing those fairways even more. 15, 20 yards max is what these guys are going to be looking at. And then, if you added fans into that, I think it was really going to be a test in terms of accuracy. But it still is going to be that test, so we just won't have those fans out there. But I think what that really allows is for the golf course to show all of its teeth. None of the rough will be trampled down. Rough is, I think, around 3.5 inches right now, but it's going to be really thick and unpredictable and continue to get worse. And I was just talking to Michelle Wee West actually before this, and we were talking about those huge trees, and you can't really see how big they are, I don't think, or appreciate how big they are on television. But she said the fact that, their exposed trunks can really cause more chaos than you'd expect, right? So we could really see a lot of crazy bounces and landing areas and things like that. So the greens have been resurfaced, so they're not the bumpy Poana that I think a lot of us are used to seeing out on the West Coast, but there's going to be just enough of Po left in it that you're going to see some putts do things they're not necessarily supposed to do in probably some big time moments, especially again, as the week rolls on and things start to firm up a little bit, hopefully. So the fog is crazy. It's rolling in.
Right.
I'm getting used to calling the fog Carl. So Carl is making is making a large appearance already. It's been 55 degrees, so cold, fog. The ball's not going to go as far as we're used to maybe seeing it over the last 6 weeks. So the Bombers are still going to have a huge advantage, especially considering, the ball just isn't going to go as far as we're used to seeing, and it's a large, long beast of a course. So accuracy is going to be key, length is going to be key, and of course, it's always going to come down to putting down the final stretch.
And when you talk about this course, it's hard not to talk about some of the rough patches that it's gone through as well at times, and now rejuvenated, getting its first major. I'm just, from talking to some of the folks around there that are putting on this event, just what is the sense of pride that you're getting from them at seeing a major come to their course that just a few years ago was being used as a parking lot for another U.S. Open?
I know, and I think it was John Daly who said, listen, they should be parking the cars at Olympus and hosting a major here. And I mean, John Daly with the foresight, here we are. But I think that to me is one of the coolest things about the PGA Championship is we get to see public courses, municipal courses that me or you can pay a fee and go out and play. And Harding Park is really the epitome of that. When you go and you roll up there, the clubhouse is a pretty average clubhouse. It's not an intimidating place for you. Like Bethpage Black, I think of, that has the intimidating signs, beware, all that stuff. TPC Harding Park is one of those courses that makes you feel like you belong, and it's accessible and a course that you can get around on. So obviously the PGA of America makes it more difficult for the best in the world this week. But I think there's always a sense of pride when we talk about growing the game to bring a major championship to a golf course like TPC Harding Park, like you said, that was used for a parking lot not too long ago. And now we're saying, look, this is a place that everybody can go tee it up at. And we're showing you that not only that, but it's good enough for the world's best to go compete on it. How could you not feel pride in making a product like that?
And you mentioned the weather too. That's going to bring some interesting things into play. As you mentioned, those long hitters maybe not hitting as long this week. And As you factor all of that in, who's a guy or who are the types of guys that you are really looking at coming into this weekend?
Yeah, and listen, it's going to be who can be the longest and straightest off the tee, right? So if Brooks Koepka can straighten out a couple of the things that we saw last week, he is very much going to be in the mix here, going for that three-peat. Rory Mcilroy, you cannot ignore Rory Mcilroy. This, to me, screams his name. Daniel Berger is another one, someone that maybe would be considered a little bit of a sleeper, but very few players have been as hot as he's been so far with the restart. And he's long off the tee and has been extremely accurate, and his putter has probably been the best it's ever been in terms of his career. So, Bryson DeChambeau, you can't ever count him out now, which is so interesting. I love that someone other than Tiger has become must-watch golf television. You never know what he's going to do, what he's going to say. He's worked his butt off, and he has legitimately changed the game. So if he can figure out how to overpower this golf course and stay straight, which he has done a pretty impressive job with, and also his putting has been great, he could be one that we see rise very quickly to the top of the leaderboard. But for all you fantasy players out there, I would say target the guys who are long off the tee, but pick accuracy over extreme length, because that's what this course is going to demand.
And you mentioned one of the guys that is always talked about whenever we come to major time, and that's Tiger Woods. Now, of course, we saw him a few weeks ago at the Memorial, and things weren't looking so great. Parts of his game good, on the green, not so much. As you come into this tournament, what are you expecting out of Woods, particularly in conditions where it's going to be a little colder, maybe the back tightens up? What's the expectation there for him?
That's a great question. Listen, Tiger is still the must-watch TV. And unfortunately, it is kind of because we're not sure what Tiger we're going to get. And to be honest, I'm not sure if Tiger knows which Tiger he's going to get. And he's kind of alluded to that too, right? Like when we talked to him at Memorial, I asked him, what are the factors in you determining when you play in preparation for a major and why? And he just said it's scheduling and it's how he feels, and he's doing everything he can. Listen, no one's more competitive on the planet than Tiger Woods, right? So he's not not playing and then teeing up in a major saying, let's see what happens. Like, the dude is as detailed as it gets, and he is doing what he feels is best for his game. Do I think it's extremely difficult, no matter who you are, to only have 4 competitive rounds under your belt? And come in for a major where you mentioned it's going to be cold? You're going to have to be accurate with wedges and with your putter, which is all finesse and feel, and you haven't been competing. How do you have that type of feel? There are just a lot of questions. But it's Tiger Woods, and you never count him out. So you will never catch me on camera counting out Tiger Woods, I can tell you that.
And you mentioned Daniel Berger as a guy that you see as maybe one of those under-the-radar types of picks coming into this weekend. I'm wondering if you have any others that you're really looking at as this is a guy that we don't talk about as much, who this weekend could make some noise, get up into the top 10, maybe top 5, or possibly pull out a win.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. One that kind of is sticking out to me right now is a Max Homa. He is a California guy. He is super familiar with California courses. He's been working his butt off and he's been seeing results. He's been seeing his game start to trend in the direction it needs to trend in. He's still kind of missing the consistency part to that, but if he can get the consistency right and not be as hard on himself as maybe we've seen, especially last week at the WGC, he could be a guy that the California, the familiarity it proves to be a benefit for him. I feel like I'm blanking on a million other players, but there's a lot of players out there like that, but he's kind of the one that is sticking out to me on the top of my head right now in terms of a sleeper, right? I mean, you have the Tommy Fleetwoods, you have a lot of guys that are big names that we're just starting to see start to come into form again. Tommy he just came over from Europe. He's been gone for a long time. He always tends to put himself in contention. Brendan Grace, unfortunately, he would have been one of those guys. He was playing really well last week and then tested positive with COVID. That knocked him out of contention last week, and now he's self, isolating this week. But yeah, listen, anyone that you can kind of think like, is he long off the tee and isn't spraying it left or right? Like that's going to be the type of guy that you want to look for right now.
And Max, of course, one of the most entertaining personalities as well on the PGA Tour. There's no question about that. And you mentioned COVID and the effect on the tour with the players. From the standpoint of the coverage for CBS, it's been different, right? You've had to do a lot of different things, but the broadcasts have still continued to go on. And on top of that, bring new perspectives to fans. You're going to have drones out there this week around the course. Just what's it been like to see this coverage come together in such a time where things are uncertain and we're putting everything together on a week by week, this is how we're going to do it basis?
Yeah, and I mean, listen, like CBS is never a network to brag about themselves, but like I feel like I can't stop bragging about what they've been able to do. I mean, it's truly unbelievable. The on-air people, we are like 1% of the broadcast, right? Like we are taking it over the finish line. The other 99% is the behind-the-scenes stuff that's done that allows us to get there. And I don't think the technical crew ever gets enough credit, but there is not enough credit in the world that they could get to really explain what they've been able to accomplish in this restart. I mean, our footprint is tiny. It is less than half of the people that we're used to having out there with cameras and just making sure everything, audio and technology, making sure everything works seamlessly. And if you're a viewer at home, you don't notice a difference between the product that they've been able to put on television now and the product that was on television with more than double the people and hands on deck in January. And I think that is the most unbelievable thing. We have production coming out of Burbank, California. We have production coming out of Stamford, Connecticut. We have production coming out of freaking New Zealand, right? It's like, it's absolutely wild what they've been able to do. And then you add in that fold of it being a major championship. And listen, the expectations are higher for everybody, right? Expectations are higher for the golfers and they're higher for us. We want to bring the very best. And what does that mean? That means more technology with the same tiny footprint. So it's pretty unbelievable that they've been able to put together what they've been able to do. I'm excited to have our announcers, more of our announcers back on site this week, even though we don't get to physically see each other. It's funny, Jim Nance and I have been on site together every week, and I just saw him in passing walking to our cars for the first time the entire time last week on Sunday. So it's different and it's weird, but I think all of us have a new perspective that when sports and golf was taken away from us for so long, we're just so grateful to be able to broadcast it and bring it to fans at home and give people something, to look forward to and to root for. And now to have other sports back too, it's bringing some sense of normalcy to a very unsure and abnormal world right now. So what they've been able to do is incredible. And I think we're all just grateful that this has worked out the way it's been working.
No doubt about it. It's certainly worked for all of these broadcasts over the course of the last couple weeks and months here. And want to switch gears a little bit with you now to We Need to Talk, with a special episode coming up on CBS prior to the golf coverage this weekend at 3 p.m. Eastern time. You're one of the panelists. And just from your perspective, what's it been like to be part of that specific show where you have an entirely female host and panel structure, and it's all run as well by females? Not something we see in sports at all.
Yeah, it isn't, but I hope that I hope this does not remain the exception to the rule. I think it starts to become like, listen, it's not, I've always said this, I never, when we talk about equality, right, I never want someone to get the job because they are something. I want them to get the job because they are the best person at the job. And ideally, and this will take a little bit, but for viewers to watch and say, you know what, that person has that job because they're the best. Not because they're, a female, not because they're a person of color, not for any other reason than to say, I know why that person's there, and they're there because they deserve to be there. So I think what We Need to Talk does is it brings together unbelievably talented women in the television business. And it showcases that, listen, like, this show is going to look and sound the exact same. And you know why it looks and sounds the exact same and why it's phenomenal? It's because the best people at the job are doing the job that they have worked their butts off to do. But it's awesome, right? Like, I've looked up to Tracy Wolfson my whole career. So to be able to sit with her and talk to her like we're, equals is, I mean, I don't feel like we're ever going to be, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's awesome to be able to sit there with the people that really paved the way for me to have the opportunities that I have, and just to be able to hear other women's experiences and talk about, the female side of things. For instance, like, we had Michelle Wee West on and talk about a powerhouse. I mean, she just had a baby, and now she's working a major, and on top of that has accepted the assistant captain job for the Solheim Cup. Oh, and by the way, in between her newborn baby's naps is taking the baby out to the driving range so she can get her game dialed back in, because she hopes to be playing on that Solheim Cup team next year. And those are the things that, like, women just, we grow humans, we have humans, and then we're still working. And that's just an experience that I think is so unique, and it's so powerful, and it's wonderful to be able to talk to those women about it and see how they literally do it all, and still have such high expectations for themselves in their careers too. I'd have to think it's hugely motivational and inspirational, and hopefully eye-opening too to our male counterparts who see how hard it is. All of us know how hard it is, right, to do our jobs and want to be the best at it, but to add these other folds into it and not use it as an excuse, but almost as motivation to continue to work hard and, and separate yourself is, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, you mentioned inspirational, and that's the word that Katrina Adams, one of the other panelists on We Need to Talk, was telling me a couple of weeks back when I was talking to her about the episode that she was appearing on. Same sort of thing. She was talking about Tracy Wolfson and the experience of being around these people. So I guess the answer to this is yes, but that same sense of inspiration runs through you as well, right?
Absolutely. And I actually got to do a show with Kat last year, and I walked away being like, how do I become friends with her? Because I feel like I could learn so much, from, she is unbelievable. So yeah, I think it is. I think it's just finding, when you're brought into a show like that, you find people who are like-minded. They're so passionate and they're so hardworking, and there's no excuses, and everyone just wants to be the best version of themselves and wants to lift everyone up along with them, because they know if everyone shines, it's good for everybody. And I think that's really a message that is hard to get across in the broadcasting world in general, that there is room for everybody, but specifically, I think when you put a bunch of women together, it's really important to showcase that, hey, listen, we're not competing against each other. We're working for and with each other so that we can all accomplish the same things. Because that is something that I see in a surprising way, is, there are other females out here in the golf world that do what I do. Yep. And I can't tell you how many times I get tweets saying, like, Balionis versus this person, who you got? And I'm like, do you do that with the males? Like, are you like Nance versus Faldo, who you got? Right. Like, we're not, just because we're two women out here doesn't mean we're competing against each other. I actually hope the best for them, because the better she is, the better I am too. So, yeah, I think it's just kind of eliminating that sense of, that catty competitive stereotype, to showcase, listen, we all want to be great, and we all can be great, especially if we do it together.
And also from the standpoint of just, you're bringing a different perspective than we're used to seeing in sports. And by we, I mean the collective sports audience, right? You're always coming at things from a different perspective than I would, or than one of the commentators on CBS Sports Network who's a person of color that played college football. Whatever the case is, it's usually a male-dominated field. We don't get the same perspective from a female most of the time. Now we're getting that with this show. And just what's it been like to see the feedback that you've gotten from people about this particular show, and the ways and that you're thinking about sports and maybe opening their eyes a little bit to different avenues of ways to think about athletes, think about issues within sports themselves.
Yeah, and I think maybe what's eye-opening, and I think the best comparisons I can probably say when people watch the LPGA for the first time versus the PGA Tour, right? And people are like, oh, wait, they hit it how far? They do what? And you're like, yeah, dude, they're still professional athletes. Like, they're not lesser than. You know what I mean? Just because they're women doesn't mean
Right.
it's much different than what the men are doing. And a lot of times, even the PGA Tour players will tell you what the LPGA Tour players are able to do is more impressive in terms of you know, like their games and their finesse and their drives off the tee. You know, guys are always impressed, I know, when they go out and watch their female counterparts. And I think that's what we can get from this show as well. Like, hey, yeah, listen, we're females talking about sports, but guess what? You're going to learn just as much, hopefully, or think about things in a different way, because we are people that are passionate talking about sports, not just because we're women, you
Right.
know, like, yeah, we still know what we're talking about. Even if we haven't, you know, played football, I can still talk to you about football. And that's, you know, it's the same thing. I never played, I played volleyball in high school and in college, right? So I go out there and I talk about golf. I bring a different perspective, not because I'm a female, but because I'm coming from a fan media background. So when I ask questions to players, I'm not asking it as a, you know, professional athlete that's turned media. I'm asking as someone who was on the couch, and this is what I would want to know if I'm a fan. So I think that's the different perspective that I personally can bring. Now, Michelle Lee, is she bringing even more in depth? Right, she's bringing a different one. But yeah, I do think probably her perspective changes now, because she's thinking, what would I want my daughter to know about this person or from this person or about me, in terms of, you know, as an athlete, the kind of impact that you can make. So yes, absolutely, different perspectives are going to be there, but I think it's for a multitude of different reasons, maybe not so black and white in terms of a male versus female perspective.
For sure. And those perspectives are ones that are sorely needed, to say the least, in today's sports environment. So we need to talk coming up this weekend prior to CBS's golf coverage, again, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Amanda, before I let you get out of here, PGA Championship, I know it's way early in the week, but give me who you're watching for, maybe to make that run to the final round on Sunday and be in contention.
Well, I gave you those front runners, but I already did think of someone else that I forgot about when I was trying to think of like darker horses, even though I don't know if he's considered a dark horse. Xander Schauffele is another really good one for you to think about in terms of a guy that's performed incredibly well at majors, but has yet to break through, and he's starting to heat up. His putter's starting to get, you know, I think he's starting to figure things out a little bit there. Tony Finau is another one. Like, when you think about guys who are really good and come really close, Tony always shows up in a major. He has not yet figured out how to close consistently. He just has one win. It feels like he should have 8, but he is always up there. He's always in the hunt, especially on a golf course like this. It suits his game. And he's one that, when he saw how far Bryson started hitting it after the restart, he started saying game on, and he's added length to his game as well. And Ricky Fowler is another one. Last week we saw him kind of start to come into form, and he shows up big time on big stages too. So if we can see him figure out a way to close this week, and he's another California guy, by the way, he might be a good one to keep in your back pocket too.
All right. Well, CBS's coverage of the PGA Championship coming up this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Amanda will be there with you for all of it. Amanda, thanks so much for the time today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.